Now, if you would, it is good to be.
It is.
It is good to be here. We are here to make love visible in all things. I have a piece that I will read here. It's by Reverend Joe Duvall. It's entitled Lay It Down. Here is where you can lay down the weight of the world that has rounded your back. Here is where you can rest, where nothing is expected, but that you bring all you are.
We are fortunate. I'm Marilyn this morning, and I want to thank Gay and Julia for selecting this reading. I have read it over and over this week. It has soothed me. This is from Small Wonder by Barbara Kingsolver. In my darkest times, I have to walk, sometimes alone, in some green place. Other people must share this ritual. For some, I suppose it must be the path through a particular set of city streets. Comforting architecture. For me, it's the need to stare at moving water until my mind comes to rest on nothing at all. Then I can go. I can clear the brush from a neglected part of the garden, working slowly until it comes to me that here is one small place I can make right. I can plant something as an act of faith in time itself, a vow that we will, sure enough, have a fall and a winter this year to be followed again next spring. This is not an end in itself, but a beginning. I work until my mind can run a little further on its tether, tugging at the central pole of my sadness, forgetting it for a minute or two, while pondering in school meeting next week the watershed conservation project our neighborhood undertaken, the farmers market it organized last year. The citizens, the good that becomes possible when a small group of thoughtful citizens commit themselves to it. And indeed, as Margaret Mead said, that is the only thing that ever really does add up to change, small wonders. These are the currency of my endurance. Thank you so much, Veronique, for those beautiful words. We're thrilled to welcome Bianca Perlet, our guest speaker for today's service. Bianca is a Vashon native, the founder and director of the Vashon Nature Center. I think of Bianca, I think of her laughter, brilliance, creativity, and resilience. I first met Bianca with her two children in July 2012 at a butterfly dragonfly camp at the pond behind the country store. Bianca's children, then 3 and 5 years old, were captivated by the insects, as I was, along with Bianca's infectious curiosity, wonder, and joy. Bianca envisioned and started the Scientists in Schools program at Vashon Island School District, in which sixth graders worked side by side with scientists, studying stream bugs as indicators of the health of local creeks on Vashon. Community scientists of all ages learn that they can make a difference in the health of our local watersheds. Bianca is an innovator and an ecologist who brings people together to experience the wonders of nature. So without further hesitation, I'd like to introduce Bianca Perlet.
I should say that I can't take all the credit for starting Scientists in Schools because I hadn't gone off the ground. So good morning, everybody. Thank you for having me. I'm going to take you on a long journey today. I'm going to start a long time ago in our planet's earliest ancient days, where life was coming along in an anaerobic atmosphere using sulfur to metabolize and grow. But that all changed 2.45 billion years ago when cyanobacteria figured out how to use light to photosynthesize. And one of the byproducts of photosynthesis is oxygen. So what happened next is called the Great Oxidation Event. And from the point of view of that early anaerobic organisms anyway, this was a huge global pollution event. The makeup of our very atmosphere was changed, and this was caused by a fellow life form. 16,000 years ago, global average temperatures were 6 degrees centigrade colder than today, and where we were standing was almost 4,000 feet of ice above us. It's currently predicted that global average temperatures will rise at least 4 degrees centigrade in the next century if current human greenhouse gas emissions continue. That's almost as much of a difference the other way, right? But the Earth has been here before too, in terms of temperature. Most of Florida was covered under the sea at that time, so go. Earth has changed immensely during her existence. So as we reflect on the theme today of repair, a question that's central to us at the Vashon Nature Center and what we discuss a lot is, what does it mean to restore the earth? When we are restoring nature, what is it that we're repairing? When I first started studying earth systems biology at Stanford in the 90s, the alarm bells were just going off about global climate change. And during this time, there was also a huge push to start restoring or rolling back environmental damage to some previously determined state. And everyone was trying to figure out what did that state look like, and what time should we go for that reconstruction. And it was almost always defined as some sort of untrammeled state of nature that ostensibly occurred pre-European contact. Part of this effort to relieve impacts was to put missing animals back in the system and to restore those pathways and functions that they performed. And during my summers in college, I worked in Idaho, and the animal that my team was focused on were wolves. We were trying to determine whether enough wolves were coming back into the Frank Church Wilderness of River of No Return Wilderness already, or whether they needed to be introduced by the Fish and Wildlife Service. So the Frank Church Wilderness, I don't know if any of you have been there, is the largest in the lower 48. It's incredible. The first time we were flown to the center in Chamberlain Basin, and we couldn't land on the little grass runway because a mama moose and her calf wouldn't get off of it. So we did howling surveys where we howled for the wolves at night, and we tried to elicit responses. And on one of our first howling surveys, we inadvertently set off an elk stampede. Hundreds of elk at 10:30 at night. We saw bears and salmon and bobcats. I saw my first cougar in the wilderness there, and countless smaller wildlife. It was really incredible. Besides the wildlife, when we came back to the small towns, we met the people. On one Forest Service road, we were chased by a man with an axe because one of our trucks in our caravan was that light green color of the Forest Service. Another time we stumbled upon a spotted owl shooting contest where they were using instead of clay pigeons, clay spotted owls. So it wasn't as bad as it sounded. But still, talking with these people, all of us came to the same conclusion that perhaps wolf reintroduction was not going to go over too well in this area. We were afraid for the wolves, and we hoped that we'd find enough naturally coming back through corridors in Canada that the government would decide not to reintroduce them. We didn't find enough, and reintroductions began around the same time as Yellowstone reintroductions. And the turmoil and the fight over those wolves is still raging today. And many, many wolves that had no say in whether they wanted to relocate from Canada have been killed or have violence suffered at the hand of humans who also had no say whether they were going to have wolves in their neighborhood. So even decades after these reintroductions occurred, wolves and the ecosystems they were reintroduced into are arguably a little better off. The food chains are knitting back together, but it's not super great. And the humans are locked in this raging battle, right, with each other. So that restoration policies for wolves go back and forth every few years, which isn't good for the wolves. It's not good for the humans. It's not good for the ecosystem. So this is one experience where I started wondering about how restoration should work and what we were trying to restore exactly and at what cost. So we're now learning that before colonist arrival, the lands and waters of this country and many other countries around the world were not untouched. They were actually lovingly touched. And the people who were caretakers are still here. Beaches here in the Northwest are enhanced by clam gardens. Herring runs are enhanced by placing fir boughs in the water as extra substrate for eggs to attach to. Indigenous people take those eggs, but they also give back generously to build those runs. And forest gardens, we're just starting to learn about areas of high diversity in these forests that are still visible in the landscape, providing fruits and berries and habitat at higher concentrations than surrounding habitats. And these are even in places where the original tenders have been gone for 150 years. You can still see these signatures. And these wild-looking forest gardens don't fit conventional Western notions of agriculture, so it took us all the way until the early 2000s to really even Western scientists to even recognize that they were human created. But now they're being uncovered here, Pacific Northwest, in British Columbia, in South America, in Central America. And it's prompted one of the lead researchers to say, a lot of functional diversity studies have a humans are bad for the environment approach. But this shows that humans have the ability to not just allow biodiversity to flourish by taking a standoff approach, but to actually be a part of it and be promoting it. So, if the earth changes through millennia, and if the plentiful lands that colonizers experienced when they came here were not due to the absence of humans, but rather in a lot of cases the presence of them, what is it that we need to repair? In subsequent years of my wolf studies, I was introduced to the power of citizen science. And this is what Jay was talking about. Right now, pretty much every program at BNC, Vashon Nature Center, it has that as an underpinning. And we call it community science because it is driven by the local community and in service to the local community and the local landscape. Community science involves everyone in collecting information about their own nature instead of leaving it to agencies or to the ivory tower. I first saw the power of citizen science when my boss convinced the Fish and Wildlife Service to give the radio collars of some reintroduced wolves, the radio for the radio collars of the reintroduced wolves near him. We also involved the public in tracking wolves through howling surveys and shared with people facts about the lives of the wolves and their benefit to the ecosystem. After a season of citizen science and tracking wolves on his radio, the rancher shared how much respect he'd developed for them. He'd watched them struggle. He'd seen them pass by his cattle. Not all the time, they did get some calves, but many times he'd seen them pass by, and he realized how hard they worked to track down their prey. And he said he respected hard work. That was a core value of his life and that he had for himself. And so he ended up being an advocate for the wolves. So for me, this is when a new answer to the question of what we're trying to restore started to grow and take shape. I realized that restoration was less about recovering a state of nature that existed before humanity screwed it up. It was something at once simpler and also at the same time a lot more complex. Restoration is primarily about repairing our human relationship with the natural world, about reinvigorating that sense of connection, respect, reciprocity that has been lost in our dominant society. So without that, no amount of physical restoration of ecosystems is going to work. Wolf restoration is not going to work. Salmon restoration is not going to work. Orca restoration is not going to work without fundamentally changing the way that Western society views and interacts with nature. As Robin Wall Kimmerer says in her book, Braiding Sweetgrass, it's not just the land that is broken, but more importantly, our relationship to it. So Vashon Nature Center was created as a response to this realization. What if there was a nature organization whose primary focus was building community support systems that help us repair our relationship with the natural world? And how can a nature organization operating within our modern society infuse nature into our daily lives and through all ages in our community? As I was tracking wolves in Idaho, I thought about this. As I was studying yellowfin tuna at Monterey Bay Aquarium, I thought about this. As I was decoding prairie dog language in Flagstaff, I thought about this. As I was teaching environmental science to kids in Yosemite, I thought about this. And I always found myself returning to Vashon when I thought about this and to my memories of growing up here and to the mentors I had here and the nature of the place itself and the hours I spent outside as a child, and how all that has helped me instill this awareness and also this sensitivity to nature that many people I met in my other walks of life didn't seem to have as strongly, even in the natural sciences. And so when I found myself back here studying for my doctorate at the UW and raising my family on this island, I joined the board of the Land Trust. And I was helping them with some conservation planning. And I realized that the published information out there that I was trying to use for the maps, for the planning, from the governments and academics was absolutely inadequate for Vashon. The scale was too large, and all the nuances were missing. And I knew where that information was. It was stored in the people here. And I thought about citizen science again when I asked to become a part of the small group of salmon watchers on the island. And Yvonne Cooperberg said, "Sure, you can join if you'll take over the organization of it." and so with that, BNC in its infancy took on the long-running Salmon Watch program, which is a citizen science program. And after that, in our first BioBlitz, we started to become this container for that knowledge, for that local knowledge, and a gathering place for generating more of it. So connection and repair starts with listening. And one way that we're listening is through our long-term monitoring that we're doing here on the island at BNC. We're listening to the earth. Right now we have about 40 volunteers out on the creeks that go and look for the salmon coming back. They each have their own spot that they go back to each week, and they help us track salmon trends. Earlier in the fall, we had volunteers coming out to the streams with us, and they collect little stream invertebrates. And these bugs can tell us through their quantities and types how healthy the streams are and what impacts they're experiencing. So this is another form of listening, right, to the streams. We're asking, how are you doing? What do you need? And over the years, we've learned from these bugs that collective restoration from King County, from the Land Trust, from private landowners is starting to move those scores of integrity, biological integrity upwards. So we still have a long ways to go, but our creeks are repairing. And we're doing it. We listen to our beaches this way, asking the same questions about shoreline restoration. And we have about 18 different community science projects that we're running that are taking the pulse of our island and involving people in doing that. At our field site in Heron Meadow at Vashon Center for the Arts, we are doing on-the-ground restoration. That's the only place we're doing that directly. But we are coupling that with monitoring so that we're getting feedback from the meadow about how we're doing. And we recognize that any form of restoration on the land is also a form of change, which is an impact. Right? So, for example, we've been monitoring pollinator populations at the meadow, and we realized that when we took out invasive species like blackberries and thistle and tansy, that we needed to replace those lost blooms and food sources for the pollinators. So now we've shifted the standard restoration techniques that usually focus heavily on trees and shrubs to include ground cover and wildflowers. So we've listened also to the birds. We've done bird surveys there, and we're planting plants that enhance their habitat. So scientific monitoring is a way of listening to the earth in her language carefully and over long periods of time. And something else happens when you do that together. Not only are we collectively gathering information that helps us understand those nuances of our home, but when you spend time sorting through stream bugs or straining your ears to listen for salmon week after week, you are soaking this place in on a totally different level than you would just in your day-to-day life and seeing it in a completely different way. So the place starts to imprint on you, right? There's an intimacy in this work of looking very carefully. You have a drawing map of the veil of nature, your home. I've been working in nature my whole life, and I have a job where I regularly feel wonder at something that I never knew about before. This happens all the time, and I'm so grateful for it. It's incredibly enriching for the soul. So one of our first Nature Center programs when kids returned to school after COVID shut down was with Gay's class. Sixth graders, taking them out to the creeks to monitor stream bugs. We were going to Judd Creek for a field trip, and Gay called me at 9 o'clock at night. COVID was, after COVID, school was insane. Kids were amped up, stressed, confused, behaving poorly towards each other. And Gay called me at 9 p.m. at night and said, I don't think we should take these kids tomorrow. She had some safety incidents in the class. And she was worried that there would be safety. So we talked about it for a while. And what we finally landed on was that of all kids and all times, it's probably most important to get these kids outside. So I turned around and I called my board members and I tried to get the student to adult ratio up, and we're calling for volunteers. Gay called the bus barn and asked the bus driver to stay on site the whole time in case we had to bail. And I prepped all of the rest of the staff at VNC. We were ready to go. And long story short, the field trip went off without a hitch. The kids behaved better than they did in the classroom, and no one got hurt. And at the end, my group stopped at a little footbridge over Judd Creek. And similar to the Barbara Kingsolver reading, we just sat there and everyone fell silent. No monkey business, no squirming, and just the sound of the stream. And then it was time to go, so the kids shuffled up towards the bus, but one kid didn't move. And he's dressed all in black. He had a hoodie, over. I couldn't even hardly see his face. And he's just standing there by the stream. And so I just stood by him for a while. I didn't really know what to do. But then it was really time to go. I had to get him back to the bus. So I just said, nice spot, isn't it? And he just took this huge breath. He didn't talk to me or anything. He took a huge breath and just let it all out. Just let the sigh release. And you could just feel the tension just going off of him in waves. So that's the magical thing, right? As we tend to nature, nature tends to us. As we repair our forests and our streams, they repair us, because our health and nature's health are connected. Every one of us comes from ancestors that were close to the earth. They needed to be to survive. And when we feel that connection knitted back together again, we feel the goodness of it, the peace, the wholeness, the grounding, and the health that comes from it. Because even today, we need it to survive, right? Our life support system. Our Western society values right now the economy, the acquisition of objects, which often leads to this one-way path of taking and hoarding without giving back into the system. And that's just divorced from the natural flows of the earth system. It's incomplete. And this causes a lot of harm to each of us within ourselves, and also to the more than human life that are wrapped up in the system with us. But when we enter into a dialogue with nature, we enter a completely different system. It's a life honoring system where a give and take happens, where there are cycles, a dance of receiving and mutually thriving. And that's a whole different operating system. And that's the root of repair for our society. Giles Hutchins, who's a writer, says the next evolutionary step for humankind is to connect what we have learned and adapted during the scientific, industrial, and technological revolutions with what we can learn from nature's wisdom. That is to say, integrate that mechanistic analysis and advanced technological innovations with nature's insights and ecosystemic awareness. To incorporate the latter, we must renew how we engage ourselves, each other, and the world around us. We must reclaim our own inner nature, our sense of self, and the connection to our outer nature, the natural habitat around us. We must reclaim our humanity and restructure our ways of living, our societies, and our organizations to be based on the logic of life. So this is what we're in the thick of at VNC. We have a roots and wings concept, and after many years growing strong roots here on Vashon, we're starting to spread the wings of our work. And part of this is connecting our information gathering to larger efforts around the Salish Sea region. So we're now sharing data on biodiversity, forage fish, kelp, salmon, and more to regional and international efforts to increase that awareness and understanding of what these systems need to thrive. We have over 50 partners working to bend the curves of environmental decline all over the Salish Sea. But it's not all about the data and the info sharing, right? It is about learning and bringing together other worldviews that can help us accomplish that shift in the mindset that it will take to transition to this new operating system that's based on this logic of life. So, two more short stories. The day after the election, we took the environmental AP environmental science class to a hip hop climate conference at University of Washington. It was the most fun I've ever had at a scientific conference. It was a scientific conference with a soundtrack. There was a DJ on stage, and he played an entrance riff as each speaker came on. And the mayor of Seattle talked, and there were a couple Latina district representatives or hip hop artists. The dean of the School of Engineering at the UW talked. The climate change scientists were all in the same room, and the sense of community and common purpose and strength of these leaders who have had to tackle so many ups and downs throughout their careers was palpable and inspiring, as was the combination of science and environmental justice and politics and music all in one room. This is the kind of integration that it's going to take to get us to the next stage of evolution as a society. This week, we took high school students over to the Puyallup Reservation to help restore Wapato Creek. That's a culturally significant place in the middle of the Port of Tacoma. And the Puyallup tribe and the Port of Tacoma have been working together to restore 20 acres of wetland there along Wapato Creek. And this is the third year we've taken students there, and it's a remarkable experience. Our students learned about the restoration project, and they helped throw hundreds of chunked salmon back into the stream to return, and they're dead, their carcasses, to return ocean-derived nutrients to the soils and the waters of that area, and to enhance that. What that does is it enhances the stream invertebrates, because the stream invertebrates eat the carcasses, and then that provides more food for the fish that are coming back. The fish eat the stream invertebrates. They also got to see a culturally modified tree that marked the significance of this place to generations of Indigenous people. And they learned about that worldview of the Puyallup tribe that's fueling this restoration. So as we listen to the words of the Puyallup tribe members standing there, literally in the middle of an environmental wasteland, if you've been down to Port of Tacoma, and showing us how they're bringing this spot back to life. And as I witnessed kids from Vashon standing shoulder to shoulder, throwing chum back into these waters and laughing and seeing who could throw one the farthest and actively helping with this effort in their playful way that they do, and soaking in the words and just the essence of this place, it was poignantly clear to me how repair can happen on so many levels in so many ways at once. And it makes me feel incredibly hopeful. And it makes me yearn for more of this bridging and more of this science, working together and cracking open and creating a whole new worldview that combines science and technology with heart and community and life-affirming values. To me, this is repair with a capital R, and I'm so grateful for it. And anything I can do to push it forward, and I'm sure all of you feel that same way, is so important. So.
Wow, thank you so much for those beautiful words. And Rowan, I just I want to just thank Rowan too. He's amazing. And thank you for the beautiful, beautiful music. And let's just take a few moments to kind of let things settle in and reflect on the message from Yoga. Rowan, anytime you want to lead us, and how can I keep singing?
Oh, and that was so I felt like I don't have a science background. I'm a homegrown naturalist. Grew up in sagebrush, wandering around with rattlesnakes and everything else that was out there. But today we have these two extremes of ecologic grief and despair. And when I listen to her background and the projects that she's engendered for kids, and we this next piece comes from I Sing the Salmon poems from Washington. And this is the epigraph by Billy Frank Jr. I don't believe in magic. I believe in the sun and the stars, the water, the tides, the floods, the owls, the river, the wind. Their measurements, they tell us how healthy things are, how healthy we, because we and they are the same. That's what I believe in. Those who learn to listen to the word that sustains them, hear the message brought forth.
Again, and I just, I don't know if Ann Spears is here. So Julia and I and many other of you I saw there went to a poetry meeting that was part of Vashon Nature Center's project in the Land Trust. And this is the book, I Sing the Salmon Home. And so what I'd like to do is just acknowledge all the poets in this book. And we have permission from the co-publishers to read a couple of poems, and from the poets as well. So the first one I'm going to read is from Catherine True, who's a long time Vashon Nature Center volunteer. So moss bright river flows, while salmon's spirit shimmers deep within her. And this is a poem from Anne Spears, who's also an island poet. And it's called Dressing. Some women are bone with glitter in the eye. Others are flesh and speak of the skin. Toward the ocean, there is a show. She aligns the twig and light. What is in hand dresses the woman. What is in the eye covers her soul. Now she stoops in the salon, winds spider web around her fist to string across, to close the wound. At Kalelok, she picks lichen from the black limb, counts fern spores on the underside, pulls the skillet of the afternoon sun over her head. At Kapalava, she stands off trail in the bog. Cedar steeps, rain pours, the river fills with tannin. At Cape Johnson, the ocean sips and throws white foam. Pebbles ravel in its belly. Salmon run the hoe opening, pressed to the shelf. The Olympics rebound gigantically. Still, close, under her eye, traced by her hand, salt and ice form. Salmon flash silver in her net, and the brocade of gray tatters fades into the constant luster of rain and wind. So we're going to be taking some time for joys and concerns. Thank you, Rowan. I was enjoying your music so much. Thank you, Rowan. And we will now resume the recording as we finish the service. And for offertory, the fellowship engages beyond our walls for peace, social and economic justice, freedom of belief, and protection of our planet and its inhabitants. Once a month, we contribute to the financial offering to a community organization that aligns with our values. Today's supports Vashon Nature Center. And I'd like to invite our greeters to come up and pass around the offering basket. And as we pass the basket, please join in singing We Give Thanks. It's on the back side of your laminated
Robin Wall Kimmerer of Great Sweet Bianca Cypher. We Americans are reluctant to learn a foreign language of our own species, let alone another's. But imagine the possibility. Imagine the access we would have to different perspectives, the things we might see through other eyes, the wisdom that surrounds us. We don't have to figure out everything by ourselves. There are intelligences other than our own all around.
Joseph Cherry has a prayer that seems to be quite fitting in these times. The prayer is titled "For Living Intention." If we have any hope of transforming the world and changing ourselves, we must be bold enough to step into our discomfort.